Assalamualaikum everyone. Thank you so much for hosting me at the MAB Centre, and thank you to the host for reading out my bio or attempting to read it out. I don't even know if there's 150 Islamic countries or whatever, organisations. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, especially in a place that's very close to my heart and was just an idea before it was created. I thought I'd share with you a couple of things about my journey. Assalamualaikum, Nasser, how are you? I can't believe you put me at the front today. This is hard work. So before I get into my story, and I wanted to share a couple of things with you. One is, what's it like to be the leader of the largest Muslim representative body in the country? What's it like to do, how is it like to do some of the fiercest interviews on Islam and Muslims at a time of deep political division? And thirdly, what does it look like out there for Muslim communities? And particularly being a woman, especially for all the ladies in the room, sharing some of the challenges particularly that we do face, being the very first woman to ever lead the organisation. But before all of that, just to maybe give you a little bit of an introduction to my introduction, the Muslim Council of Britain was established in 1997. It's the largest umbrella body for Muslims in this country, and it was a response organisation after the Satanic Verses. So it was the realization by Muslims that we needed to advocate and respond for ourselves, that when our religion came under fire, we had to find a way to articulate that. 26 years on, it's still standing, and in 2021, mainly mosques, imams, and communities decided to elect the first ever woman, the youngest, and the first Scottish Secretary General, alhamdulillah. So it was a bit of a crazy one because it was COVID, and I was a humble Assistant Secretary General just trying to do some good work. And someone said to me, there's an election coming up, why don't you consider it? And I said, who's going to vote for me? I'm from Glasgow. You know, what on earth, how can I be a Secretary General? What even is a Secretary General? How would you run an organisation like that? The other thing that I had to consider was, when you're a Muslim and you decide to be a leader, your name is going to be in the firing line. So when you take that step forward and decide to put your head above the parapet, you also have to remember there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice. So when you're going to be a spokesperson or a defender of the faith, people will be coming for you. So you can forget such things as privacy, or you have to put that side of your the idea that people are going to attack you needs to be at the forefront. And then finally, I think the reason that convinced me to run in the first place was someone said, isn't it about time? 50% of Muslims in this country are women and also are under the age of 25, the young people. So don't we need an organisation that actually speaks to the Muslims that are here and the young people and what they want, desire and change? So anyway, I ran in a contested election against a very famous imam and I won. And then my life changed. Within 1 hour, I became something called a public figure and a bit of a celebrity. And we broke the news because the world couldn't quite believe that Muslims had elected a young woman to lead them. And so it was a very positive story, but some parts of the media said I was a puppet, and also I was a pleasant face away from a bearded, cross-eyed man. So, and I quote, so this idea that a woman could lead was very foreign, never mind elected from a membership. So it's not like I'm appointing myself or the group's appointing me. Masjids across the country are electing me. So I have a mandate. And I remember in the first hour, I did a BBC live interview at 6 p.m, 4.5 minutes in my living room during COVID. And one of the uncles messaged me, yeah, that's why we voted for you. Because people wanted a confident, articulate voice that was prepared to speak on their behalf and not feel scared to do it. And you might also remember I had a really famous interview in my first week of election on Women's Hour. Did anybody see that? No? Okay, so you can imagine, I was told that it was going to be a really nice interview, and the journalist was going to be really friendly, and instead it was what they call hostile. And as soon as I got on, her tone changed and she was building up to a negative question. And she said, so you claim to support women and all this stuff, so tell me, how many female imams are there in the UK? And I thought, oh. So I was just standing there thinking, okay, I knew where she was taking the question. She wasn't interested in the answer. The answer was just going to make the headline. And so in that moment and in that week, I realized that whilst we as communities had moved on, we're really diverse, we're young, we're vibrant, the media and politics around us hadn't moved on. So in their head, we're all still really oppressed. In their head, we're really backwards. And the fact that there's no female imams, that's it. So as soon as that interview finished, it went viral. I was on the front page of The Guardian, and people condemned it and said, this is outrageous, this is a really positive story, and you're trying to create something negative. The actual whole interview was really difficult, and she was just very aggressive. But I got a good taste of what was to come, and that's the idea that being a Muslim in leadership is not going to be easy. And one of the challenges I was going to face was, how do I challenge and take on a media that really doesn't like us? And how do I challenge a media that has a fixed vision of what Islam is and who Muslims are capable of being, especially when my whole being kind of defied it? So looking through that journey, one of the first things that I would say about leadership and resilience is you have to be tough. If you want to do something difficult and different, you need to build up your own inner resilience. And that basically means you need to be courageous enough to step forward and take on the heat. And in that year, we had 2 terror attacks. I found myself leading meetings with senior mosques at 10 p.m. on Zoom after quite a bad terror attack, and they're all looking to me, so Zara, what should we do? And I thought, oh my gosh. Anyway, I did give them some really good points as to what we should do. But the point being is, you don't get to decide what the journey looks like. People are depending on you, and you have to be confident to step forward. One of the challenges of being a female in leadership in particular is taking up space. So you find that we tend to hide a little bit. This role doesn't allow me to hide. Everybody wants to know what I think. And everybody needs to know now what's the decision. And so one of the Islamic principles of leadership is shura. And one thing that I found really challenging was I came into the organization very young, and I was the youngest person there and the leader. And so someone said to me, I've been doing this for 35 years, what do you know? And I said, well, I'm the boss now, so I think we'll just do it my way. And what I realized was that, Allah puts all of us where we are meant to be. And so there's a reason that I'm meant to sit here and, everybody else is sitting where they're sitting, because we're all on a journey. And so if Allah is giving you the privilege of the position, you have to use it. And you have to be bold enough to say the things that are difficult to say. And even though we had to deal with these terror attacks, and even at that time there was unfortunately conflict in Gaza, which I'll talk about shortly, it was tricky because one of the challenges that I thought was really important is, who are Muslim communities today? What is the state of them? Okay, so I've entered this big organization, I'm the leader, I'm the boss, it's very stressful. The next thing I wanted to know is, does anybody want to follow me? Because part of the test of leadership is it's no good if you're leading yourself, right? Where is the flock? So I thought the important thing to do is probably go around the country and ask. And so those 200 organizations I mentioned, we visited in 2022. So lockdown had eased restrictions. And I went everywhere from Leicester, Liverpool, Leeds, Blackburn, Newport, Swansea, Cardiff, up to Aberdeen, Manchester, the little corners and pockets where there were Muslim communities, we went to meet them. And I sat with the most senior conservative scholars, to the women's groups, to the youth groups, to the charities, the politicians and the local councillors and everybody else in between. And particularly to our members, I said, do you still believe in us? Do you want to follow us? And obviously the first thing is you're met with some complaints, so you have to deal with that and say, yeah, we're sorry, or I actually wasn't born then, or maybe I was 10, so you have to just be apathetic to people and where their pain is. But the most important thing was actually acknowledging that the community has come a long way. And whilst you'll find Muslims all over the UK now, they're doing an amazing amount of work. Even if you look at this centre, I remember when we used to be in a house, in a tenement block, and just to think how far it's come now, just sitting there thinking, well, this place is massive, and people are coming from all walks of life here. The MCB and Muslim communities here in the UK are the same. We're about 40 to 50 years old, and people came from far and wide, not really knowing if they were going to stay, but they built something. And now this next generation are growing something, realizing that young people today are facing so many issues, whether that's on mental health, whether that's unemployment, whether it's the breakdown of the family, or whether it's simply the confidence to be who they are. Because that's some of the biggest challenges. So we have these meetings, and what people said is, look, we are looking for leadership, but we want an organization that can speak for us confidently. And so that brings me to one of the biggest interviews that I did, which was in 2022 with Ian Dale. So I don't know if anybody watched that. So LBC, has everybody heard of LBC? So it's one of the most widely listened to radio shows in London. So it can get up to millions of listeners. So they've been chasing me for a while to do the interview, and I thought, okay, I should do it. There wasn't any big story. It was just, we want to speak to your Secretary General and hear what she has to say. So it was January time in 22. It was live and it was drive time, 7 p.m. So anyone can call and ask anything. They vet the calls, but obviously we know they're going to choose what they're going to choose. So I did a couple of things. I had some meetings with my team. Are we going to be okay? And they said, look, it's pretty high risk. But if you want to go for it, then, we did a bit of prep. I called my mum because I felt that was a really important thing to do as well. It'll be fine, just do what you always do. And then I prayed. I prayed to Allah and I said, oh, turner of the hearts, turn his heart towards me, i.e. the presenter. So then off I went, Bismillah, and I was in the studio, and I just thought, I was sitting there and I thought, okay, we're here now, so we might as well get busy. And what's the first question that they ask? And so there's a caller, lady calls in, she's very emotional, and she says, why don't you represent the Ahmadiyya community, right? So if you're familiar with it, It's a very challenging question, and my Twitter feed was full after I answered it with lots of hate. But the interviewer spent 4.5 minutes on that question, and I simply laid it. I said, "This is a theological difference, But don't we need to modernize, Zara? Don't we need to modernize the religion? Do we need to just change some things?" I said, "No, we can't change some things." So it was the conversation then went on to arranged marriages. It was a whole full swing of things people were calling in to ask about. And it was tough. It was a very tough interview. But at the end of it, alhamdulillah, it did overall go well. But the point being was, it was an important moment for me because I realized that we need to stop being afraid. And we see today the importance of speaking our truth in amidst a very challenging time where what you say can really be used against you. And what you say is being restricted. And so that interview, I think, was a real positive win for the community because they felt we're finally speaking our truth unapologetically. We're saying what we need to say. And what was interesting was every time he said, well, your organization isn't very democratic. I said, well, they elected me, so I think it is, So all of the tropes that he had were being diffused very quickly. But again, it's challenging. And in the course of my tenure, I remember when there were allegations in government about Islamophobia, I did about 19 interviews in 2 or 3 days. One of the big challenges that we have as community is we don't have enough spokespeople, and we don't have enough people who are willing to go on media. And I don't blame them, it's not a very nice place to go, but it's really, really challenging. I think you've seen, if we've watched all the Piers Morgan interviews and everything else on TV right now, it's tough. So moving the journey on a little bit, I thought I'd maybe share some of the things that I've found in the communities that I visited as well. So that's kind of the media politics side of things. But I want to share some of the stories of some of the schools that I visited across the country. So I went to a Manchester Muslim girls' school, and mashallah, a brilliant school. It's been around for ages, and there was an assembly. And all the young girls were really excited. Some of them had seen me on YouTube, and they were asking questions. And there was a little 8-year-old, I think, she put her hand up and she said, so Zara, how do you deal with stress? And everybody laughed because she was like, how on earth does she know about stress? What is she talking about? And then I went to the head teacher afterwards and she says, Zara, it's very difficult when they walk to school. They get abuse for the headscarves that they're wearing, the fact that they come into this Muslim school. And so whilst you might not appreciate it, at every level, there is challenges, particularly for young Muslims to be Muslim. And I just kind of thought to myself, I thought, gosh, an 8-year-old being stressed out, how does she even understand what stress is? And so there's a really important responsibility that we have today in how we take care of our young people, and also how we challenge things like Islamophobia. The other little young person that I wanted to share with you is a little boy that I met in Newport, and it's a little madrasa that they'd set up, really in the middle of nowhere, really quite amazing. And he said to me, so the first little girl, she says, because my colleague is a doctor, so she said to him, so how many maths tests do you need to do to become a doctor? And after that very official question, the young boy said, you really achieved a lot, Zara. I must be like 10. So can I ask you, are you proud of yourself? I was so stunned by his question. You know when someone asks you like a really deep question and you don't know what to do? He said, are you proud of yourself? And I kind of laughed and I looked at my colleague and thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. And it cut deep because there's an important question that he's asking for all of us. Are we proud of ourselves? And when you're in leadership, you're often asking yourself that question. Am I happy with who I am today and what I've achieved? Have I made an impact? Did I do everything that I could do? And so whilst I was very diplomatic with his question, I thought that sometimes young people can ask things that are really quite powerful and that tell us something more important about our responsibility today. So being a good leader and being resilient isn't just about how strong you are for yourself, but it's also about how you hold yourself to account for all the gifts that Allah gives you and the good that you're able to do in the world. And so when he was saying, are you proud of yourself? And I quoted him again in a dinner I spoke to, I think it's a question that we all have to ask ourselves. Are you proud of yourself right now? What you've achieved? And what else do you need to achieve to help those after you? And so fast forward now, 3 years in, alhamdulillah, I was re-elected. I obviously couldn't get rid of me. And it's been a really tough year. I mean, generally, obviously the first part was okay. But the last 3 months have been very, very challenging. And that's kind of why I offered the topic leadership and resilience. Because whilst we normally talk about leadership, we're in very different times. And so when the news had broken about the current conflict, Gaza and Palestine and Israel and everything that's happening now, I remember thinking, I wasn't sure what was going to be happening, but I knew that it was going to be different. Because you have to remember, my responsibility as the leader of the Muslim Council Britain is not just continuing the advocacy that we're doing for Palestine, but also is looking at the British context of that advocacy. So on one side, every single day we're battling the media and the headlines, them trying to stop free speech and the advocacy. On the other side, you're trying to push and advocate and lobby politicians, maybe not so much now, but then there's another side of it, which was around community cohesion and upset. Then there's there were so many things to do. I don't think we slept for the first 2 months. And everybody was really, really upset and really troubled. And obviously you're really upset and troubled too, because you're thinking, I'm supposed to be strong, but I'm looking at this news feed of death and destruction as much as anybody else. And everybody wants it to stop. Everybody wants a resolution. And so one of the key things that I learned was that Allah's going to test you with all kinds of trials. And you don't get to choose the trials that you're going to be impacted by, but in some ways they're going to define that moment of leadership. So your test might be, oh well, look at the way they're suffering over there. But that's their test, right? Your test is, well, what did you do in this moment with the powers and the influence that you had? And it's not necessarily just about thinking about the external world, but the real test is what's happening inside. Are you closer to Allah right now? How would you measure your strength of faith? How are you thinking, how are you connecting to Allah regularly? And that's the thing that I found the most important part about this position, which is when you become really famous, you get invited to lots of really nice places and everybody tells you you're really amazing. But there's a side of you that knows the truth of who you are and what you're actually capable of. And so with all the things that are happening around us, you have to go back to yourself and think, okay, Allah's going to hold me to account, but He's also blessed me with His mercy and all of His gifts and love. So how am I using that? And so one of the most important qualities of a leader is self-reflection and self-improvement and thinking about how do I get to be better today so I can serve people better tomorrow. And the final part that I'll maybe just share, and we'll do some Q&A, yeah? Is that okay? You want me to talk for an hour? I don't think I should talk for an hour. The final part that I wanted to share with you is all about the future. So let's talk about some stats. There are nearly 4 million Muslims in the UK. Did you know that? That's quite a big amount. So we're making up maybe 5% of the population. Of that, as of the 2021 census, 50% of Muslims in this country are 15 years or younger. Quite a lot eligible to vote, over 130,000 this year, inshallah. So of that, if you were born as a Muslim baby today, you're 3 times more likely to be born in a poor family. 40% of Muslims live in the poorest economic localities in the UK. 40%. So statistically, whilst we're growing in number and diversity, we've got this huge refugee population, half of all of us are young people. So half of the Muslim community right now are young people, yeah? The other point that's really important is nearly half of us are living in poor, deprived areas. The other positive side of it is 27%, I believe, are more academically, so we're doing better when it comes to academic attainment, but less of us have hit the highest level of economic empowerment. So we're doing better, there's more of us in professional fields, but we're still not reaching the pinnacle of that. So what do those statistics mean for you? Well, for those of us who are leaders, you have to think about who is going to be the workforce of the future. Young Muslims. Who are going to be our leaders? Who is going to be taking over the space that we now occupy? And so you have to think about, if our work isn't connecting to those young people, then we're not really doing a very good job. The other thing we have to think about is economics. Our community doesn't really talk about finance, financial literacy and financial empowerment, moving from being the employee to the employer, moving to owning instead of renting or borrowing and all the rest of it. So economic empowerment is really important. One of my colleagues said that they're part of the National Zakat Foundation, who distributes zakat locally, that 50% of those who seek zakat are women, you know? And so many of our communities are struggling, especially with the cost of living crisis. So there's both an opportunity, whilst we can look a little bit sad at some of the statistics, you can also look really positively that because there's such a young, vibrant, energized community of British Muslims who are not talking about whether they're British or Scottish or anymore, that's your opportunity to do something differently and to create communities that are actually creating a civil society and changing things beyond. So whilst I do get the privilege of being the first female Secretary General, I am hoping there'll be many more, as well as many more. I don't know if they're all going to be at 29, but we do hope that there'll be more a little bit younger coming through. And I guess I just want to thank the Centre today for hosting you. We're going to do maybe a bit of Q&A to think about, to gauge what you're thinking about. But the most important thing about leadership and resilience, and I'd say to you, is it's all about your relationship with Allah. Because resilience comes through trials. So don't look at the bad things as problems, just see them as like important for your growth. So you need to go through the tough stuff so you can be tougher. So maybe I'll stop there, inshallah, and then we can take some Q&A from everybody. Thank you so much. Do you want to? So I just take people's, yeah. So anyone ask any questions? Yes, sister? Maybe you don't stand up for me, yeah. And, yeah, if you project.
Basically, for your talk, it's quite interesting to actually listen to this. And statistics that you talked about, the economic situation, and obviously this actually affects how children, how livelihood. I just wanted to know from the organizational point of view, what is it that you as an organization, thinking about the situation, how can we bring a change? What can we do? How can we empower those families to sort of develop themselves? Is there something that the pipeline that you thought about that you can actually do?
Yeah, absolutely. So sister's just asking, with regards to economic empowerment, yeah, what can we actually do to help support? So what we're actually doing is looking at financial literacy workshops. We're hosting a leadership conference in June, and we're looking at real change comes at a local level, like places like this, right? Conversations, training, all the rest of it. The bigger stuff is just for inspiration. I think what we need is, people always say education, but it is true actually. You need a lot more role models. What I found, especially because I travel to London all the time, is there's lots of like organizations, particularly down south in London, where there's hubs. And what you have to do is share that knowledge and understanding, and that comes through connecting people together. A lot of young people will say, well, we've never seen that done before, so how do we know it's possible? So there's they estimate around 1,200 Muslim millionaires in this country and a couple of billionaires as well. And we have businesses, property, I mean, you name it, Muslims are actually very wealthy as well as very poor. We're quite on both sides. And so of those wealthy or those who've achieved a lot, how many of us can see them as role models or connect to them or understand how did you get there? So I think aspiration is another point as well. So from our side, we're going to be providing events and campaigns. But I think from the community perspective is, in order to create aspiration, you have to show people what's possible. And you have to connect them with people who've done it before. So if you come from a community where no one's really gone and left that community, or you've not really seen anybody but doing what they always do, then how would you know it? The other thing that's really important is families have to support young people to leave the nest and do things a bit differently. Many of you might be international students coming from far away, many of you are local, but our communities, especially mums and dads, like to keep us close. But actually, we have to empower our young people to travel a little bit, get that exposure, and then maybe come back and build. And so hopefully, inshallah, there's definitely more to come. Anybody else want to ask anything?
So that last point we said, young people traveling alone. So I take it if a young person is put in a situation where they travel alone, that helps them with their resilience, confidence, is that right?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily mean like traveling alone, but I mean like say they want to go somewhere outside of the city for university, or say they want to try employment in a different city, or these things. The point being is you have to create a wholesome individual, you create a character, right? And character building means you have to do things that are different. It might not require traveling outside of a city if you live in a big city and there's lots of jobs and opportunity, but it means being able to go into an environment where maybe you're the only Muslim there, and some of us have had to do that. Maybe you have to work with people of different faith communities or no faith at all, and you have to ask them for somewhere to pray. That's quite a daunting thing. But don't look at that as the barrier. The opportunity is for you to grow and become a leader and learn something and grow, and maybe you do your own startup. So don't see things that are scary as a barrier to you achieving something great. When I came into this role, there'd never been a woman leader, right? So first of all, I have to deal with that. Secondly, I'm the youngest person in the organization and I'm the boss. I have to manage staff. I have to make decisions on finance and HR. I have to do media. I have to think of strategy. So I had to do lots of scary things. And if I said to myself, oh, there's no way I can do that, I won't be very successful. So the idea is you have to look at challenge and figure out how to overcome it, not see it as a barrier to your progress.
Do you think the traditional mindset of our elders, like, I'll give you an example. When I was in my teens, my mom would not let me go, out the area, so that can still be a barrier, I think, with young ones where, we do see a lot of incidents happening, like something happened in Birmingham recently, where violence, whatnot. So I think that would you say that's a factor in preventing young people from going out of their comfort zone?
Yeah, I think if it's up to our mothers, they'll never let us go anywhere. Mine was the same, and we saw how that ended. I think I do a little bit of, so this is being recorded, so I'm not going to say anything offensive to any mums here, but a little bit of rebellion is a natural part of youth. So just do what you have to do. The point being is have a conversation and then push a little bit, and then just maybe push a little bit more. My point being is, we as a community have to do a lot more. Yeah, we are not exactly not in the news all the time. We have to do more. Some of us have to be in journalism. Some of us have to be in politics. Some of us have to be in business. Some of us, we have to be everywhere. Maybe in sport, in fashion, in culture, in theatre. We have to be in lots of different places. If we're not in lots of different places, we don't have a voice there, and we can't build what's called a civil society. So when issues happen in the news, we feel like we don't have a voice, or nobody understands us, or when we go to a workplace. Look at Ramadan is a really great example. Everybody's talking about Ramadan, football clubs are hosting iftars, Asda, Tesco, everybody loves Ramadan. Ramadan has become a British part of the calendar, yeah? A, because it's monetized, so there's economic benefit, but B, people genuinely are excited. You have employers saying, we want to fast with you, we're going to do Ramadan challenge, we want to do iftar. So Ramadan has become normalized. And because Ramadan has become normalized, Muslims become normalized too. So Ramadan's part of something that we all take part in, and our non-Muslim colleagues want to know more about it. Whereas before, I mean, I did sessions where there was a young journalist, she said she was so scared to tell her boss about fasting, she waited an hour after the fast opened to break her fast. I had a colleague, he said he was working in a store and his manager said, don't think you're going to get special treatment just because you're fasting. You know, so these are old attitudes, but now people will be like, that's outrageous. We want to make sure our Muslim colleagues are, you know, supported. Now that only happens because a lot of Muslim colleagues went into the workspace and talked about Ramadan. That only happened because we ventured there to teach them more about us in a way that was so positive that they came together. So remember when everyone was wanting Eid to be a public holiday, but they said, well, you can't choose which day you want to do it on, so we can't make it a public holiday. Now most schools and employers understand that we have it on 2 days, depending on wherever you follow, and will accommodate for it. So the point being is it takes a bit of time, we do get there in the long term, but unless we dare to cross, you know, an ocean, we won't be able to really find out what's on the other side and change attitudes towards us. Yeah.
Okay, just a last comment, which you said about the Ramadan and Eid. Actually, what MCP is doing towards it to make a money.
Oh my God. I got asked, someone sent me an email about moon sighting and said, look sister, this is the issue. If you can.
Because I'll tell you, I asked the same question to Father Murad.
Oh, did you? Oh my God.
Because luckily I was going to London from Loughborough.
Right.
At the time was, they were living in Loughborough. And I actually got the train from Loughborough and he got it from Leicester because he lives in Leicester. And he came and sit in front of me and we started chatting. And then I said, could you tell me one thing? He said, what? I said, please can you money?
You're now asking for miracles, and yeah, there's no way I'm touching that issue. We're going to leave that to the scholar. We'll leave it to the experts, yeah. Moon sighting is not in the periphery of my manifesto, so yeah. But the main thing is we all celebrate Eid, and you know, we'll leave it there. Any other questions from the ladies? You have to ask one, because I'm going to stare at you until you do. So you're all holding us up. Come on, who wants to ask? Where are ladies in the back? Come on, sitting. I think you could definitely come up. There's loads of young ones in the back. If you can't come up with a question, I'm really just feeling quite afraid of the future now. Your sister sitting there, yeah? Do you want to ask something?
I know.
Okay, there we
What
go.
was your journey like? How did you reach there? Like, how did you get to know about this position? How did you approach? What was your mindset throughout?
Yeah, so I've always been very involved in community without really knowing I was very involved in community. So I think I've always had the passion to want to help people, which I think we all have, it's part of our faith. And so I didn't really ever see myself as a leader, because especially women, I don't think we ever see ourselves as, oh, but what if I'm not good enough and all the rest of it. But I think it's really the way that Allah just opens the door for you. And my feeling was if Allah opens the door to good, wouldn't you take it? You know, and most of our good is time bound, so you don't have an infinite amount of time to do good. It's just what Allah gives you. And so the position and the opportunity, you know, so I was part of the student scene and we were a member of this big organization. But I would just say that it wasn't really something in my control, it was more purpose driven. I think each of us have a gift or a calling, something that we feel we want to change or do. And I remember I used to see, you know, the Uncle Jews on TV after a terror attack. And, oh gosh, please, you know. And they choose the craziest person to represent Muslims. They just find someone that just couldn't articulate and just was awful. And you just think, and see, this is the thing, you should be careful what you wish for. So I said, they don't represent us. Look at the way it's terrible interview. And now I find myself doing interviews just like that. So I think part of it is what you seek to change in the world. There's also a story that I always found that maybe I always think back on. So during university, I used to help run the student society, you know, some South Strathclyde Uni, the mosque there. And we had all sorts of people come through because of the city centre. But there was a student actually, and she was from Gaza, she was from Palestine. I remember she came into the prayer room once and she was crying. And I said, you know, I used to live in the prayer room. I said, so what's wrong? Why are you upset? And she goes, some of the students were making fun of her abaya and her like headdress. And I said, well, that's wrong. You can't do that here. And she goes, no, don't, you know, no one's going to say anything. Just leave it. Obviously, that's not what I was going to do. So I marched to the students' union and said, do you know what's going on here? And this student has faced this awful issue. You need to do something about it. Obviously, I was friends with everybody in the students' union, which was helpful. They got the security cameras. They found out who it was. They were banned, and she got an apology. And then she started crying again. I said, why are you crying now? She goes, I didn't know that this was possible. I didn't know it was possible. And it's such a small story, and maybe it's a little bit insignificant, but if you think about it, sometimes our small acts of good can really mean a lot to people. And in that moment, it was just like I felt it was my responsibility to do something about it, and Allah's given me the tools and the communication ability to do it. But that's, I guess, what a lot of this role has been. I visited ladies groups in Leicester, for example, and really strong ladies as well. And they said, Zara, nothing's going to change, And I said, look at where we are today. We're sitting around here. You ladies, some of you have set up mental health charities. Some of you are teaching young people skills. You're all sitting here and things have changed, right? We're not all the things that we need to change have changed. Well, a lot of things have changed. There were times where, for example, some places didn't let women in mosques. Some places still do, but a lot of places do. There were times where it was very difficult for us to even get employment or whatever it was, right? Things have changed. And when I think about my mum's generation or the generation before that, it was difficult just to have a different coloured skin in this country, never mind a visible face, So we have been through a lot as communities. And you've got to remember, some of the communities in the UK have been here for maybe 200 years. We've only been here for about 40 to 50, and some are even newer than us. So taking that into consideration, we've done all right, but we still have to do a lot better. But yeah, I think purpose drives you and Allah guides the way. But you have to be prepared, because if I didn't take the step forward, then I wouldn't know what was going to come next. So alhamdulillah, it's been quite the journey.
You talked about the percentage of Muslims living in, poor kind of households. That's quite high, I think. Would you say a lack of skills and education? We're talking about attainment, probably the subject here. Would you say that could be attributed to this?
Yeah, so what you'll find is, and we're talking about places in London, for example, places in East London, Tower Hamlets, one of the poorest boroughs, Newham is one of the poorest boroughs. You're talking about places in the north of England. You're talking about pockets of the Midlands. I actually went to the poorest ward in the UK. I think it was in the Midlands or the North or somewhere in between. Literally, it was one Muslim centre, and they were taking care of all the nursery, education, ESOL, filling in applications. And they said, we hardly get any public funding. We have to do everything ourselves. They said, some of our community don't even take their kids to the park. They're afraid to go, they don't know where to go. Some of them don't know how to fill in their medical forms and all sorts. So they do all of this work. And what you realize is there's a couple of issues. One is there could be cycles of unemployment. So there could be we've always been poor and we're always going to be poor. So there's a kind of an attitude and a mindset of who you are and what you do. There's also, as you said, poor education. So some of maybe culturally it's not viewed, attainment, education, skills. But also it's also down to the fact that those areas are actually really poor. So when Muslims came, they were housed in poor localities. So what's happening is, so for example, say you live in a council house, right, in a very poor area, and with lots of other poor people, right? And there's no parks, there's no green spaces, no real opportunities. You're not in a big city, so you really have to leave your hometown to go to a big city. Maybe there's no university, so all of it requires a lot from you. And there isn't really enough from the state to actually push you along the way. So it's a combination of factors, and it's very much on a par with the local community as well. So in parts of the north of England, they've never received much investment or funding, lots of drugs, criminality. So what you find is that it's not people choosing to be poor, but it can be cycles of, it's lots of layers of it. So if you live in a bad house and it's overcrowded, or if no one in your family's gone to university, or, so there's lots of different factors to it. Most people perceive their circumstances as, nothing's going to change, and it really takes a lot of effort to leave and to do something different. So think of how hard it is to leave a cycle of poverty. You need help, right? You need someone to show you a way. But often you'll find, the other part of it is employment as well. So see, I think young Muslim males, actually Muslim women are the most marginalized when it comes to employment. So visibly Muslim women, it's harder to get a job. than anybody else, as well as visibly Muslim men and having that name. So we've got more barriers than everybody else around us, but we've also shown how we can overcome those barriers. So some of the work is about going into communities and offering support, but some of the work is also about mindset and being able to think you can actually achieve something different. So it's a tricky one.
So that also leads me on to the mental health. So I've got so many questions. You mentioned about the mental health issues in Ghana. Would you say our Muslim youth are coping well with the mental health in comparison to the other communities, or sorry, the social media?
That's
social
true.
media, is that playing a part?
I think mental health is bad everywhere, and if we're honest, it's impacting our young people just as much as everybody else. So, especially the COVID era of young people who haven't socialized as much, but generally panic attacks, stress, depression, loneliness, isolation, suicide, these are all really sadly very common. On top of that, there's things like spiritual abuse and people feeling quite vulnerable, people in broken families and broken homes. We still have all the same issues. The extra layer that we have is it's still a little bit taboo to talk about, although I think young people are talking about it, but getting help is hard. So I remember I visited a school, and it was a girls' school. The girls were doing amazing, and one of the girls said that my dad suffers from mental health issues, but he's not getting help for it, and it's really a struggle. And again, there's also young people who suffer from like anxiety, and again and you see the mental health support provision is quite poor as well. So I would say it's quite an important area of concern, and we don't have enough facilitation to support it. The other thing is that a Muslim may want to talk to a Muslim counsellor as opposed to a non-Muslim one, just because of that spiritual side of things. But again, how many of those do we actually have? The other side of it is when we were looking at how mosques run, a kind of vision that we would have is that even a mosque can't provide everything, but signposting to services is really important, or having counselling provision is also really important. So what you find is the trends are showing that families are going to have more issues. You're going to have disputes, breakdowns, all the rest of it. And it's precisely that point, like social media. I mean, right now you're watching like very difficult news coverage, On top of that, it's winter and it's cold, people feel sad and lonely in the winter. So I think mental health is going to be a big issue. But again, like, what are we going to do about it? What are we doing about it? So raising awareness is important, but providing services and actually accepting there is a problem is maybe also really important. Okay, we'll go to ladies then, if that's okay. Right, ladies, any questions? I think there's like a whole bunch of young ones in the back, right? I think you guys need to ask something, just to instill some confidence in the future. Maybe the one with the brown hijab, I can see you. Yeah, I think you should ask the question. I can feel your confidence from here. It's glowing. Right, what would you like to ask? You can ask a group question. How about you just ask everybody, right, what do we all think?
Whenever you guys put yourself in the journey, how did you overcome your doubts, and how did you just kind of go into it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. See, there you go. Right, how do we overcome doubts? So I have major imposter syndrome, really bad, because I couldn't actually believe I was a Secretary General. Like, what on earth is that, and how on earth could I be it? And the second thing is, when you're leading an organization, everybody gives you advice. So you start to doubt yourself because everyone's giving you like 25 opinions on what you should be doing. And I remember that it took me about maybe 4 to 6 months to really be confident in the role because I kept doubting myself. And I got into a bit of an argument with someone about a decision that I needed to make. And I got on with this person, so it was weird. So imagine having an argument with like someone you really like. It's difficult because you're just thinking, well, we're friends, like what's going on? So I had an argument, and we had 2 very different views on what we should do next. And then I went for a 2-hour walk after that argument, just walking around for 2 hours. So I was thinking, I'm just trying to figure out what we should do here. It was quite a big decision to make. And it was regarding something about the team. And then I thought to myself, my job as the leader is to get everybody across the bridge, even if I don't like them, right? We have to accept it. So you may not like everybody on your team. You have to get everybody across the bridge. So my job is not to take the people I like across the bridge. If you want to follow me, that's great. Maybe some people don't want to come. But if I've got a team, I've got to take everybody with me. So the other part of my job is to do the right thing. Because I spoke to someone that I take advice from and they said, Zara, you're going to do the right thing, aren't you? And I thought, okay. And then that's when I realized that if I kept doubting myself, I wouldn't do the right thing. Because it's better to regret the mistakes that you make because they're your mistakes than to regret mistakes because someone told you should do something. And the other thing that I thought was really important is, like, Allah's put me in this position, so I'm the one that has to make the decision. It's quite scary, but you have the power. You literally have the power. So the idea is, you're in the driving seat, you get to decide. So either you decide to drive the car, license permitting, or you let someone else drive you, if that's how you want to do it. And so I decided that I had to drive the car and I had to take everybody with me, even if they were being a little bit difficult. So that was very important. And the thing is, when we're in lots of crisis situations, so I have to deal with pressure a lot of the time, that's the moment where it really counts. Because the minute you doubt yourself, people lose confidence in you. So one thing I would say to you is, number one, recognizing where Allah's put you and the actual fact that Allah's given you absolutely everything you need to do what you need to do. The second thing is having good support around you. So you need to, I say cheerleaders, but you need some good people around you. If the people around you don't push you and don't make you think you can do something better with your life, are they really your friends? Should they really be around you? If the people around you are just telling you you're amazing all the time, that's also a little bit problematic. You need some good, healthy, normal people. Like my mom, like she doesn't care, I'm the Secretary General, I'm still gonna do the dishes, she'll clean up, she'll still tell me what I need to do. You know, that's what the great thing about being from Glasgow is people humble you here. But at the same time, you know, you need people who are like, well, why can't you do it? They'll hold you to account. You said you were gonna do this. Why are you not doing it? You know, and then I think having a better expectation for yourself is really important too. So if you don't dream a little bit bigger, then you'll just play small. Not that I intended to dream this big, but you know, this last year I got to visit the United Nations in New York. You know, subhanAllah, it was really surreal. It sounds very fancy to say, but you're sitting there and you're thinking, gosh, this is where they have all these big meetings. But that's not something I ever thought I was going to be doing, you know. So unless you vision it, you know, it's in some ways thinking about the favors of Allah. If you believe He's going to grant it to you, He will grant it to you. So why play small when He can grant you so much in abundance? So I think all of us here actually could play a lot bigger because Allah can grant it for us. So yeah, think about the people around you and then think about what you're actually thinking to achieve with yourself.
You mentioned that you've been up and down Scotland and the UK, just in general, you've been up and down, you've been Manchester, just not even so focused on the country. I see you've had to get in touch with a lot of Muslim communities, maybe conversate and try to get them to live music. What would you recommend? Just to make the community better, to get them more involved in their own community, get the community back to life as many are dead. Kind of just, you know.
So the question is, I've visited lots of communities, so how do we enliven them? Because some of them are dead. How do you engage? So basically, how do you create communities that are more energized and engaged? Yeah. So it's a very good question. I think one of the most interesting visits I did was Birmingham, because Birmingham is just so they predict that in 2030 or 40, like 40% of Birmingham will be Muslim, I don't even, probably already is, but Birmingham is really full of so many Muslims and they're so diverse and they've got some of the biggest mosques there. And you know, it's a long-standing community if you visited, and also lots of really nice food. So Birmingham is really interesting because you've got people who have lots of different types of groups that they connect to, lots of, you know, so I remember sitting in one of the mosque meetings and it was quite a fierce and scary meeting because they were quite annoying. What have you done? And you know, tell me what's your greatest success and this, that and the other. I was like, oh my gosh. But I remember after the visit thinking about that question, which is most of our communities, so generally speaking, Muslims are the most active in faith. So we're very visible, we go pray, Ramadan we fill the mosques up, Fridays we're here, but with that, you know, our places of worship can be a little bit empty. Secondly, our young people are less and less engaged because they don't like the traditional model of an organization or an institution, because you're on social media, you can have more followers than the imam, so why do you need to follow him? I think the key thing is, are our institutions and places willing to do things differently? And who is the audience you want to engage with? So for some mosques and some institutions, they're happy with the congregation they've got. It's all the same, we all believe in the same thing, maybe we all look the same. For some mosques, they've actually upgraded and they said, you know what, we want to do more activities that appeal to the community. Like we've just partnered with Duke of Edinburgh. So Duke of Edinburgh is offering grants to mosques, I should share with you. So they're offering grants to get mosques to have Duke of Edinburgh programs that they host and facilitate, and they'll put some money towards it and then they can do it. Some mosques are doing sports, academic, science, others are providing counselling, therapy. Everyone's got the things that they can do. The reality is, the place of worship is really important for all of us. We all connect to it, we all feel connected to it, even if we only come once a week. But the job of the leadership is to think about where is the congregation at and what do they need next. And if you want to engage people, you need to talk their language. So for example, if you don't have a social media presence but you want young people to come, I don't know if they're really going to come, because they want to see what it's like before they come here. They don't want to talk to a scary old imam, They want to know, like, if I come in here, am I going to be judged for the way that I look, right? They also want to know, like, what do they actually offer? How can I get involved? For some people, they might just not really want to engage so much, but they want to know that you're doing a good job and helping out. That's internally focused. The other way you have to look at it is, how are you engaging with the wider community around you? So some mosques, for example, give space to elderly groups to have little coffee mornings, Muslim and non-Muslim. Others do like food banks. I remember one of the mosques in London, the ladies would actually deliver food parcels to the elderly in the area because they struggled to go shopping. And they just said it was so rewarding, So there's lots of things you can do, but I think you have to think about your audience and what engages them. And you have to bring in people that are diverse to do that. You also have to accept that people are changing the way they want to engage and how much they want to engage. And then when they do come, like Ramadan, then you need to think about data capture. What is the things that people are interested in? But I think it's generally is quite a challenge because people have a lot of burdens in their life, cost of living, or they're worried about lots of things. They've got to get their kids through school, this, that, and the other. So it's not necessarily because you're ineffective. It's also because what people are going through is more challenging. So I think there's lots of things you can do, but if you don't innovate and do things differently, you just end up with the same result. So you have to bring more creative solutions. What we always encourage is to look at what other people are doing, just copy that. So, but I think this place has come a long way in doing that, which is really great. Did you want to ask something, or have you lost it? Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's more like how to create the awareness, what type of help is available. Like you just mentioned about the sports in Duke of Edinburgh. So there's so many things that are available, but unfortunately, the people who are running it, they are not aware of it. So
yeah, there's. I think I always like to defend mosques as well. In fairness, not everybody's got the administration and the financing to have a team. So if you think about it, a lot of our centres are run voluntarily, and imams aren't paid so well. So you have to balance it. Half the battle is getting a space, then it's running the space, and then it's having the finances to run it even better. A lot of the organisations we're talking about are fully funded operations, and they've got this and that. I think as long as there's a vision to grow, that's the main thing, and then resourcing that vision. Because it's like most of our institutions is volunteer-led, so it's a bit like someone's doing it as a part-time thing. And that's why it's really important that our young people kind of step up because they're so free, especially the ladies at the back, and help out. Because you've got free time, guys. I know what uni's like, they've got lots of free time. So unless everybody does their bit, it's difficult. I think we've got time for one more, or we need to wrap up now? One more. Do you guys want to ask anything else? I think they're gone.
It's not exactly a question, it's more of a comment as well, but then obviously I would like some feedback from you. I'm just comparing England to Scotland. It's more specific to Scotland and Glasgow and facilities for women. So I know that in England there's been a lot of initiatives where there have been activities and opportunities particularly created for women, perhaps taking part in sports. funding provided where the organizations have actually arranged activities specifically for women, and that actually benefits the Muslim women more when it's actually made in an environment where it's women's friendly. I think we're lacking this here, and obviously there are opportunities, and we were talking about finances before, that we are not a very wealthy community, so for us to pay for every service, that's another excuse for not becoming active. So what can we do about it? I think there should be more.
Yeah, it's such a good point. Obviously, born and raised here, that was one of the things, you know, whether it was women's swimming, which I think they've stopped now, or is it stopped now? The problem is, you know, so you got to look at it in fairness, you got to look at it objectively. So obviously our population size is smaller than England, so we've got less people, and some are concentrated in specific areas. The second thing is, sometimes that provision is made, but nobody uses it. Have to be a little bit honest. So I remember where there was like women's only gyms, and they were just, a lot of people were not using it, so they just closed the gym, right? I think swimming's been a bit different because that was very popular. But the problem is, like, we don't always turn up. And so if you don't turn up, they take it away. The second thing is someone has to take responsibility to put it on in the first place. And so what you find is a lot of people feel a little bit like disillusioned, like we did all of this hard work and then nobody used it afterwards. So, well, that's one of the issues. The other is that in order for things to change, someone has to take the first step to change it. So we all have to say, okay, I'm going to do something for youth, so then just do it. You know, if I want to change it. So I think sometimes we get caught in the thesis and the theories of why it's not working. But actually, if everybody just went and got on it, then we'd have a lot more. I remember when we were very active in university, we did lots of things, but camp on, and we got a lot of people really active. We didn't think about it. We just said, oh, should we do it? And we're like, yeah, let's just do it, you know, and see what happens. So the point being is, like, I think everybody has the ability within themselves to take something and do something with it. And if you think that this is something that's really beneficial and useful, try it. But sometimes what also happens is you do it, but people don't continue to keep it up after. But I think it's just the nature of being still a very young community. I think we'll find our feet, and the more we want to do it, we will actually do it. But yeah, I always think you should just be hopeful of the future, because there's plenty of opportunity in it. And I think my final message would just be that I've still got a year left, 1 year to go, and then I'll be able to retire, maybe just stop. What do you think I'm going to ask? Can I stop after this? They're not going to leave me alone. I feel like I'm 45 inside, so I have aged tremendously. But the thing that I've learned about leadership and resilience is that that the journey is more about who you become and less about what you do. What you do is important, but Allah judges the intentions and the efforts, right? Because He knows what's going to happen anyway. And so what I found that is that whilst I have this 1 year to go and I've got loads of things that I want to do and help and change and shape, the ultimate goal is probably to continue to be, and hopefully be, an even better person at the end of it, because the work won't stop. And I'm sure I'll be rolled into doing other things, which is exciting. I think having a life of service is a good one. But in order to continue to do good work, and I spoke at Cambridge Muslim College, I met Ramiz there, a very nice student, local as well, and I said to all the students there, I said, you know what's really important about that journey? It's about self-maintenance. If you don't actually take good care of yourself and you're not strong and energetic and enthusiastic, then not only is no one going to follow you, but you're just going to collapse. So I think being a good leader of resilience is remembering the person you want to become, keeping strong and energized in that. But also remember that, you know, if we have good faith and hope in Allah, then like we can achieve lots of great things, even if lots of bad things are happening. So on that note, may Allah continue to increase us in good, make us among those He loves the most, unite our hearts, and continue to bless us in these good works and efforts. Ameen. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure.